have one here from Lady Sarah, right? The Unraveler as.
Yep.
She says, "Hello again, good sirs." I believe this is kind of some follow up to the one we did about Summerhall a little bit ago. So I was in a hurry for a school pickup the other day and totally forgot to mention that something even more likely happened to our beloved Egg. And again, this is at Summerhall. She's talking about because George loves to rip our hearts out of our chests. As much as I love a good Maleficent dragon transformation, it is unfortunately unlikely that Aegon managed that for himself. I think he may have had, along with the others, been killed in betrayal/mutiny. I'm thinking something along the style of Jon by his brothers in Black, the Red Wedding, etc. Maesters have a thing for stamping out magic. Highborn lords have a thing for not wanting to distribute power amongst the people. You can see how this egg was eventually going to hatch. And then she has more for our Zoom theory, when we do some more of our Zoom hangouts for you people on Patreon. So wishing you both fortune in the days to come. Yeah, so we talked about the idea of Egg potentially turning into a dragon, right? Because a dragon hatches out of the egg, just kind of using that word play. But so now we're talking here about the idea of, was it something that the Maesters were involved in, and was it betrayal at Summerhall?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so one of the things I think that we did touch on this a little bit in a previous Zoom chat, and I think hopefully we're going to talk about it again a little bit more. Hopefully when Ser Ezra is a little bit more sober, guys. We got to be careful in those
Zoom chats.
You got to be careful. I don't know what I'm getting into sometimes there. I'm in a rabbit hole most of the time and don't even know it. So, but no, I think we were talking about the idea that the Maesters might have had something to do with Summerhall, and that maybe not directly. They're not directly, lighting the fire, but they might have orchestrated it in some way, or caused it, or knocked over a lamp, or whatever. Just because, they don't want it. They don't want magic to return. They are going to stamp that out. They hear the ceremonies going on. Also, if there ever was a time where you hear some crazy rituals going down with higher lords, and there's magic and sorcery and possibly wildfire and who knows what else they were going to do at Summerhall, that's a great opportunity to say something could go wrong there. Let's make it seem like that's exactly what happened. There's a high likelihood that they're going to mess this up, and we need to maybe send someone in to make sure that it does get messed up and turns into a tragedy, Mm-hmm. And I think that could be possible. And could you imagine if George does what he does, which is the Red Wedding, Jon's brothers for the watch type of situation where people say, hey, you've gone too far. We can't allow this to happen. We can't allow you to bring these people back. It would be like if he developed a really good relationship with one of the other Maesters. Maester Aemon is his brother, right? Who is being shipped off. Well, has been at that time, I think, is up at the tower, or not the tower, at the wall, right? So, yeah, something could go down with the Maesters. The other thing could be that there's a faction of people who just want to cause chaos. Maybe that, you remember we did that whole tourney, the Harrenhal tourney situation with like the Southern Ambition kind of
Ambitions Alliance and all that.
Yeah. So if that is in its early, not that it'd be almost too early, but like, who knows? Maybe there's some of those younger lords who are looking to really cause some chaos or something, and it could be that they get close to Egg and they see an opportunity where they can cause a tragedy, and they go for it. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm with you. Just because we think about the Maesters, right? When Sam goes there and he's trying to tell them, hey, I the others, and they just dismiss it. All right, what's going on? But we know there's magic going on. There's glass candles burning. There's all this stuff, and I think it is. I'm way more on the idea that the Maesters know magic is real. They know that everything's going on, and they have, if they can control it, if they can suppress it, then it gives them, it gives them power. So I could totally see them trying to do it. And remember, it's not like Egg, as much as Egg was actually, he obviously wasn't like Ares, the second. I mean, he's not the Mad King, but he did a lot of things, as you read in A World of Ice and Fire, that upset people. Marriage alliances, I mean, there was a lot of things that he did that didn't necessarily go well.
Right. Now, that's a really good point. I was actually just thinking to myself, well, like with House Baratheon and you look at where Robert Baratheon later on is positioned and why is he the one who we're kind of saying, let's push this guy forward in his own rebellion. Like, did some of that, start to fester and be, I mean, again, I know there's the blood tie, into House Targaryen or whatever. Actually, the whole House Baratheon is going back to Aegon's conquest. I always forget that, like, it's a created house. You know what I mean? And it's one that is created possibly from a bastard Targaryen anyways, which is interesting. Who knows? A brother, half brother, whatever, or good friend or whatever you want to call him. There was rumor that he might have been related in some way. But yeah, I mean, that's fascinating to think that somebody would more political scheming and maybe that marriage alliance that went south that Dunk had to go, if I was it Lionel Baratheon, right, or something, he had to fight. Stuff like that can cause some strife, and even though it may seemingly be put down, it could have festered for a while, and then
I'm sure also that maesters and stuff like that don't appreciate the idea of Jenny of Oldstones and her Woods Witch having any sort of political sway.
Whoa.
I mean, just saying, you know what I mean? I'm sure that.
Wow.
I mean, just look. We see it more in the show because it goes a different route. Look at Pycelle versus Qyburn. It's like, oh, he was banned. He shouldn't be allowed to perform these types of like these experiments and all of these things. He was kicked out. I mean, and so I doubt that. I doubt that whatever maesters there are at the time are going to think that, let's bring, because I mean, I'm just guessing, but I'm sure that Jenny of Oldstones and her Woods Witch have something to do with this more than, say, maesters, saying, hey, let's try to, whatever happens at Summerhall, if it is trying to use wildfire to bring back dragons, I'm sure that it was probably more them than it was like a maester suggesting let's try this.
Yeah, so let me just while we're thinking about this, because we actually were in the Zoom chat. I was with Sir Jimmy and Lady Sarah. I think Sir Ryan was in there, a few others. We were talking about Jenny of Oldstones and being the wife of Duncan Targaryen, Prince of Dragonflies, and the song that's made of her, the Ghost of High Heart Connection. My gosh, dude. So the whole, let me back up here real quick. So local villagers consider the wild Jenny a half mad peasant, with some calling her a witch. All right. She became popular with the small folk throughout the Seven Kingdoms, however. So the way in which the prince loved Jenny so much that he married her against the wishes of his father, breaking his betrothal to the daughter of Lionel Baratheon, Lord of Storm's End. Did he love her so much, or was he bewitched?
Yeah.
Like, was there something else going on? I because she's a part of the tragedy. I mean, like, is it that someone's upset that she stole their love, so that whole Lionel Baratheon, it could be that. It could just be a vengeance type of thing, and she shows up, and you're saying, she's taking the place, and she's getting a seat of honor, and a Woods Witch is walking in here. What in the world? I mean, what in seven hells, right? I mean, that's ridiculous.
Melisandre Jenny of Oldstones? I think it's possible.
Who knows? I mean, maybe. Yeah, I don't know. But then, yeah, is it all? Is there something more sinister going on with? Oh my God, dude! You want a crackpot? I mean, I love when you say stuff like that about Melisandre, and then my mind just goes to some crackpot theory. The idea would be, let's say that Jenny of Oldstones is Melisandre, right? and Melisandre is actually, she is some practicing witch, but she also is really, she's in that region. We call her a witch, but she's actually just beginning to understand R'hllor. And
it happens in this ceremony in which it's all about fire, and what she sees in the flames is
right. Yeah, who knows? Like so we don't really know much about Melisandre's origins. We know that she's from a Shai, the whole thing. But how long ago?
It is also revealed in this Jenny of Oldstone, Jenny of Oldstones and her Woods Witch, right? That the prince who is promised is gonna is gonna come from that line. So
right, exactly, yeah. So all of that, yeah. It'd be an interesting thing if there was a connection to Melisandre, and then, I was even going a little bit darker and just that like maybe it was time for a sacrifice to R'hllor. And
I'm just saying. I mean, you just look at the connections, because it's like through Jenny of Oldstones and her Woods Witch, right, which is probably the ghost of High Heart, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not 100% confirmed, but I mean, it's pretty obvious,
right?
Is revealed that this prince whose promise is going to come from the line of Aegon, right? Aegon the Unlikely, and then you have Rhaegar, who is reading one day, decides I have to go fight. We get him and Jon Snow, and then he dies at the Ruby Ford, and he has an armor of ruby, and people think, oh, was he glamored? Is he still alive? And who else is the one person we know who would possibly do something like that is Melisandre, and he goes to Summerhall a lot. So is it possible that Jenny of Oldstone, if you want to go down that Jenny of Oldstones is Melisandre route, well, what's saying she's not, and what's saying that he didn't find her and do stuff.
Yeah, the other thing is too,
that they concocted this plan, and that's why she's going along with it.
Yeah, for sure. The other thing that's interesting about Jenny of Oldstones, or even just like a Melisandre connection, I don't think it's real. I mean, we're just kind of loosely playing with this and having fun. But like the Oldstones, to have like those rubies or a moonstone, those stones that could possibly have power. So that's kind of funny. But the other thing is, well, I mean, Jenny of Oldstones,
Jenny of Oldstones could, maybe she's not Melisandre, but she also could be some sort of Shadowbinder like Melisandre. I mean, or Red Priestess. I mean.
Well, yeah, and Melisandre would tell us too that R'hllor works in mysterious ways, right, and uses other individuals for his own purposes and stuff, and maybe they might have been the innocents in this, and the Ghost of High Heart might be right, and that Jenny was an innocent, and maybe she's not dead, maybe she is dead. We literally have no idea with all that stuff that's going on there, but I do know I've always wondered what Melisandre thinks about the Children of the Forest. And so when I think about that, well, if she were Jenny, I mean, she would supposedly have a good friend who was a the Ghost of High Heart, or a Woods Witch, who is a child who would be one of the Children of the Forest. Because Melisandre, we don't really get a lot of her. I don't think we get many of her thoughts on the children. We get her seeing in the flames, Brendan Rivers, Bloodraven. But I don't know that we even see who he's surrounded by, just that he's corpse white. He looks like the villain for sure. Mm-hmm. So that scares the fire right out of her. But yeah, I don't know. Just some interesting, crazy potential possible connections. I still think Melisandre is totally just from a Shai. You know what? The whole who is Melisandre, it still just baffles me. And to hear George talk about her being kind of misunderstood, and is she really just?
Well, she's gonna have big chapters in Winds of Winter. We know that,
right? Yeah.
So when/if it ever comes out.
When, yeah. No, okay. So this is cool, and I'm glad Lady Sarah sent us a follow up on this, because I think it is interesting. And Summerhall, I wonder if other folks have different ideas or thoughts on it. There's not much in ways of, it's all blotted out with ink, and it's a big mystery. We don't really know. You could just straight speculate on what happened at Summerhall, what happened to Aegon Targaryen there, and Aegon the Unlikely, We just don't know. Why is it that significant? Why is it so important? Why does it seem like it's almost more important than the damn Tower of Joy and the tourney of Harrenhal? Why does it seem that connected? And it's gotta be, Sir Matt. One more, like Bloodraven prior. I mean, during the Blackfire rebellions, is there having this whole back and forth with he's Maynard Plum, which we were talking to Sir Jimmy about. He's glamour with a moonstone. He's 1,000 eyes in one. He ends up being the guy that Bran goes to. What? I mean, it's such a connection back to the histories that you're like, it has to matter. It has to be that important. And then I just keep wondering to myself, like, did George always know that's where he was going with this? Or is this just evolving on him and it is just spiraling right out of control? And we haven't, I'm just kidding. But
I'm with you. I mean, maybe not. I mean, again, it's also interesting because, you go back to when he wrote everything and what we know from that outline, what his plans were, right? His plans were 3 books, you have your 5 main characters. And so Bloodraven, I don't think became a character until, after a Game of Thrones, while he's writing a Clash of Kings is when he's also writing the first Dunk and Egg.
Right.
And so I think that's when he started to come up with more ideas for these more Targaryens, and let's expand the history and Dunk. I mean, obviously he came up with this idea for Dunk and Egg. And so I think he probably had some general idea of where he wanted Dunk and Egg to go to. And how that would go on. So that I almost think about. So was he then thinking about, I should have it be this sort of magical tragedy that ends up setting up Rhaegar, because Rhaegar's born, it's not like Rhaegar is born because of the event, but it's just that Rhaegar's birth is there at this like such an important event that I think everyone just ties it. Is it just coincident, or is it some sort of like prophetic event, that happens? And I'm totally thinking it's some sort of prophecy level event. And so then that's ultimately going to lead to Jon, who's like, the main character and everything. So, I mean, if you just think about where he wants this all to go, and as he starts going down that hole of this is where, and expanding that outline, I think it's a big deal because, I mean, I think let me look up and see when Summerhall is actually first mentioned. I bet it's a Clash of Kings. I bet it's not at all mentioned in a Game of Thrones.
Yeah, and while you're doing that, I guess I want to mention too. So you still have Egg's brother, right? Aemon Targaryen, Maester Aemon, who's alive and preserved at the Wall. You have their older uncle, right, or something, being Bloodraven, and he's super old and his life's prolonged by this tree. You have Cold Hands, who probably is Sir Duncan the Tall, possibly riding this elk, and is massive and scary and died long ago, or they killed him long ago. Who's they? The others, we don't know. So you have a lot of different players there that it's interesting that they come from that whole time period of a, Dunk and Egg series. And
so, so the Summerhall tragedy is first mentioned in A Storm of Swords.
Wow.
After he's written A Clash of Kings and the first Dunk and Egg, I believe the second Dunk and Egg came out around the same time as Storm of Swords. I will look that up.
Okay, yeah. And so I think it is important to when you're speculating, go ahead.
And just keep in mind, it comes up in a Davos chapter, and who else is in a lot of Davos chapters?
Melisandre. Let's go, man. I mean, a great fire, R'hllor, the whole 9 yards, magic and everything, trying to bring it back. So I think you're spot on in that we have to kind of keep track of what is happening when. If you want to do true speculation for Winds of Winter, when is George coming up with these ideas? How is this evolving? What is his writing style like? That kind of stuff.
So when A Storm of Swords came out in 2000. At that point there was a Game of Thrones, Clash of Kings, Storm of Swords, obviously the Hedge Knight, and then the Sworn Sword comes out after a Storm of Swords, but comes out before A Feast for Crows.
So he writes his first 3 books, and then he goes down on a side kind of, I need to write these backstories.
And keep in mind, so keep in mind, we obviously by that point in time, we have already also had an event in which Dany has awoken dragons from a fire, because that's the end of the first book. So as you get to A Storm of Swords, which is by far the best book in the series, and you're expanding on the Targaryen history with Egg, and now you're including Summerhall, the event in which Egg dies. So he's probably writing the next Duncan Egg as he's kind of writing Storm of Swords and being like, oh, this is how Egg's ending is going to finish. Maybe trying to, I mean, I think you gotta look at his writing process sometimes.
No, I think you're right. And so I was just looking up here recent events for the, Jenny of Oldstones and for the Ghost of Highheart, where they mentioned a Storm of Swords, right? That's sort of when they're first mentioned, and we come across them, we learn about them, we learn about these other places, the world starts to grow on us. And yeah, you're right. He says, this is how I'm going to. So that to me, God, I go back to like, it keeps evolving on him. I think he just keeps learning more about this world. He doesn't quite know in full, and that's fine where everything's going, but
so Summerhall, the place, is mentioned in A Storm of Swords Tyrion 3. Just it exists, and it appears in the Hedge Knight, just the name, but obviously the tragedy of Summerhall hasn't happened in the Hedge Knight because it's before. So he could certainly have those ideas, but the first time that it's mentioned in context of what actually happened is Davos 3. In which Davos says, "Did we learn nothing from Summerhall? No good has ever come from these dreams of dragons."
That says a lot, right? I mean, he
says this talk of a stone dragon is madness. I tell you, sheer madness. Did we learn nothing from Aerion Brightflame, from the 9 mages, from the alchemist? Did we learn nothing from Summerhall?
And Davos speaks a lot of truth. I mean, that's the big thing Stannis always kind of prides him on, is that he seems to cut through all the BS and gives it to you straight. And actually, he is a character we should pay a lot of attention to, because seemingly, all this other stuff with Melisandre, the hoopla it's overdone. And
and then then in A Storm of Swords, Daenerys 4. Dany is thinking about it. And she's thinking about Rhaegar. It was the shadow of Summerhall that haunted him, was it not? And then again, and yet Summerhall was not the place. Was the place the prince loved best. So she's thinking about him and his harp. And that's probably not her thinking about it. That's what's his name, Barristan Selmy, probably is telling her that. Just just in looking at the context of that text. I mean, then A Storm of Swords, Arya. That's where I gorged on grief at Summerhall. And then they're talking about it because they happen to be around there. And then we move into A Feast for Crows, and then and stuff like that. Right. That's when Sam is learning about Rhaegar and the fire devouring Summerhall and stuff like that. So, I mean, you just think about it. So Summerhall is something he's kind of thinking of and expanding on more, but he probably didn't. He came up with it certainly probably in the Hedge Knight.
Right.
As he's thinking, hey, I want to start expanding on these Targaryens. And then it really kind of takes over in A Storm of Swords. And it's all suddenly not all Summerhall's just a place. It's, oh no, this big tragedy happened there. Rhaegar's born there. They were consumed by fire, trying to awake dragons, much like Dany awakes dragons, because I already did that. But now what if these guys did it and it didn't work?
Right. Yeah. I'm doing a little search myself here, because this is interesting. You've got me all fired up. So when I just did a search, I went to a search of Ice and Fire, right? And I looked up Bloodraven, nothing until A Feast for Crows. And then I'm going to look up Brendan Rivers, right? Just because,
And he will show up. He will show up in probably the Mystery Night or the Hedge Night. And so Summerhall is mentioned actually it's mentioned in the actually Summerhall I don't believe is mentioned in the Hedge Night, but it is mentioned in the Mystery. No, it is. Excuse me. Yeah, the Hedge Night and the Mystery Night. Yeah.
Gotcha. So
mostly because they're over there, but
right. It's mind-boggling to me that these characters are not, like okay, so Brendan Rivers, like when is that character first mentioned? So it's it's just like he's not. I mean, not until like late in the series.
Right.
So are these all things that are just hidden there, and then he's just walking a character back in and saying, "Now I'm going to write some history on this guy." As I'm writing, I want this guy to walk in here. Here's an important person. I've had an idea of him in my mind. Now let me go back to. I'm going to use the series that I am writing histories actively in, the Dunk and Egg series. That's why you've always said, and I think it's very true. Everything in that series is really important, and all of the players and the connections and the, all the theories with Sansa and her right. husbands and who she's going to marry based upon the.
So I mean,
Meadow, yeah.
And you think about, just think about Aegon, right? So Egg, right? So as he's writing a Game of Thrones, he's probably and. You have Aemon, and then Aemon tells Jon who he is, right? And so then he's like, "Ooh, that I can expand on this later." And so that turns into Egg, and then what if I had a story of him? And then you get to see a young Maester Aemon. There's a young Walder Frey. I mean, just you hear them mentioned, right? So
yeah, man, it's Maester Aemon
looking at his writing process and how that all develops.
Let me ask you a question. Well, hold on. Let me
because Melisandre. I can't remember. Is Melisandre mentioned in? I think she is mentioned in a Game of Thrones. Like not her name, but just that Stannis has some.
Yeah, at the very, very end.
Yeah, the very, very end that Stannis has some sort of woman with him.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. Dude. Okay. So, Maester Aemon. Think about him for just a second. In let me see. When was it that he talks to Jon about his whole backstory? Right? Let's see. Considered helping. Yeah. Okay. It is Game of Thrones.
Yeah,
Aemon
because
it's
when Jon wants to go help Robb fight in the war, and Aemon tells him, are you a member of the Night's Watch, or are you going to be like a young boy or whatever? Like, because look at what I gave up, and he says you're Aemon Targaryen, and he knows who he is. Yeah.
Yeah, so that story, that's cool. That's nice. That that's because I was thinking to myself, like, holy, like if Aemon was just given fatherly, grandfatherly advice, and like for a book or so, he doesn't know who Aemon actually is. I mean, but he does. Right. He has an idea, a rough idea of who he is, and then he builds around Maester Aemon and this connection. I mean, that's so crazy, right? You've got Dany, who's across the Narrow Sea at Essos, is this last Targaryen. Representing fire way over there, and then far up in the north, you've got one other old, super young Targaryen, beautiful, raising, and then you've got an ancient Maester, Aemon. I mean, it's just like,
right.
And then
you had a secret one.
Oh yeah, right. I mean,
well, it was the first time. Remember the first time we read the Hedge Knight, which you can find on our feed, by the way, if you go back to the old Second Breakfast days, and you really want to listen to our first time with that. We were like amazed because we'd never read it, and two, we were just like, there's Targaryens everywhere.
Yeah.
It's like there's just everywhere. They're just like they're all over the place, and then you get to the main series, and there's not. Well, there might secretly be, of course. There everyone might secretly be a Targaryen. Seems to be the is Tyrion one? Is Jon actually one? Heck, Mira could be one. I mean, everybody.
Right. Yeah, so I don't know, friends. I think it'd be kind of cool if people want something fun to kind of look into. Think about it in terms of, George's writing style and when thoughts emerged. I mean, we've always said that Mance Rayder is super important. Why? He's mentioned right out the gate. The King Beyond the Wall.
In
that whole
every
idea.
chapter.
Yeah, he's super a big deal. So the fact that he seems to be diminished a little bit as we get into the series, I think that's the ebb and flow. I think it's like he's really he's a big deal. Let's diminish him for quite a bit, and then let's bring him back again. You know what I mean? I think I think something big's gonna happen eventually.
That we should. That'd be an interesting kind of read to just kind of look and see like who are these characters that are mentioned. And you just think about some of the ideas he's had behind him. I mean, I just go to Bran 3 when he talks about the mountain, right? Like blood black eyes, and it's like, did you have that idea that this guy's going to turn into this monster from the get-go?
Yeah, how far ahead was he thinking on that? You know what I mean? Because that's still books later. For any
many
of that
books
to be
later.
Yeah. To be set up. So
but I mean, I guess you could almost have him as this character that makes a lot of sense. Where you're like, oh, I have the Hound, and he's like disfigured. And then I'm gonna have him have his brother, and they're gonna fight. And then actually, maybe I can have it be these cool characters to kind of split up and put on opposite sides. Just as kind of side characters, because I think about characters like Euron Greyjoy. None of those guys, Victorian Greyjoy, Aryan Greyjoy, none of those guys are mentioned in the first book. And so you have Theon and you have Balon, but when did you decide, I'm going to give Theon a sister and all these other people? Oh, and this guy's going to actually be the one to come in and maybe be the final villain. So who knows?
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. That is like when do you, because he's got the idea for all these houses and for what is to come, but you've got to be building towards an end. I mean, I hate to say it's a Star Wars sequel situation, but if you don't know the end, I mean, George has he has the pillars. He has these are the big points I'm driving towards, the big reveal, twist, turn, awesome reveal stuff. And along the way, we're going to have all sorts of stuff that I'm going to weave together. And so,
I often describe it as he's got the present, and he's trying to tie this like really elaborate bow, and then you just pull it and it all comes out and it all looks amazing. Well, guys, hey, let us know. Shoot us some comments. Shoot us some more ravens, and we can continue to hammer these out. Sometimes these are kind of fun. Where Ez and I just pick a couple ravens, and just roll with it. So. Let us know. So, all right, guys. Hey, with that, we want to thank you for playing the Game of Thrones. At our next episode, we will be back on the chapter reread, Chapter 38, Arya 8 of A Clash of Kings.
If you like our podcast, don't forget to subscribe, like us, write a review, leave a comment, or send us a raven at btkcast@gmail.com.
We will see you in a week with what might be another special episode that we tentatively have planned. So keep your ears open for that one. And remember that winter is coming.